I'd like to call the meeting to order. City of Monona Planning Commission, Monday, October 8th, 2018. Would you call the roll, please?
Nancy Moore,
Here.
Chad Spate,
Here.
Griffin Dorschel,
Here.
Susan Fox,
Here.
Kathy Thomas, Robert Stein,
Here.
Chris Homburg, Ryan Holmquist.
Here.
Thank you. And I have a motion to approve the minutes from September 10th, 2018.
I'll move approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Chris?
Okay, for starters, it would be nice to have page numbers on these. Page 1, under the approval of minutes, right in the middle, but rather a circle window with spandrel, it should be spandrel glass. Page 2, B, the motion, I made the motion and Griff seconded it. See where I'm at there, just below B? Mr. Homburg motion to take case number off the table.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the second was Griff
Second, yeah.
on that. On page 3, a motion for approval, if you go down there, was made by Mr. Homburg, seconded by, that was Mr. Holmquist, seconded that. A little further down, condition 5, we need to somehow get in there that right after to be recorded with the Dane County Register of Deeds, probably a period, and then say the approval is contingent upon Public Works and council approval. And then the same thing for number 6, that the approval is contingent. Otherwise, it just reads as recorded with the Dane County Register of Deeds contingent on Public Works, but that this approval is void without our approval is void without Public Works and council. Condition 8 talks about the adjusted fencing and landscaping with approval by staff. Somebody has to take a look at that once they bring it back and show you what they're going to do, and I think you both were here and understand what we were looking for on the fence and the landscaping right there. Page 4, I have a note I don't even understand. Page 5, condition 5, Jersey barriers shall be installed to protect, and then of course the amendment changed that to Jersey barriers or re-landscaping. Towards the bottom of the page says Mr. Homburg said that the 24-foot driveway joint access easement should be that the old 24-foot joint access easement. Otherwise, it's confusing. That's the one that's already there. That would be confusing if it was left on. Page 6. Condition 1, all lots of CSM, it says and have egress, shall have egress. And number 2, the existing building be demolished, that's correct. Towards the end, a representative from Mobcraft Beer was not present. The Plan Commission shouldn't say cannot take a vote. We chose not to take a vote. We can take a vote on an agenda item without somebody present. We chose not to. That's it for me.
Okay. Any other corrections, additions? Okay. Do you and like to vote on the minutes as amended by Chris? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Appearances? Any slips?
Other than,
Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of something that is not on the agenda for tonight?
Okay, no appearances, no unfinished business. Moves to new business. First up, public hearing on request by property owner Janine Lansinger, represented by Noah Preve, Williamson Surveying, and Troy Main, attorney for DeWitt Ross, for approval of a 3-lot certified survey map, CSM, to divide Lot 5 of the Southtown Assessor's Plat, the Shops Co. lot, at 2101 West Broadway, into 3 separate parcels. Case number 2-003-2017. I understand Troy is the one that's going to come up. welcome. Please state your name and affiliation for us, would you please?
Certainly
Address.
will. Would you like this paper now or afterwards? Thank you. Yes, greetings. My name is Troy Main. I'm an attorney with the law firm of DeWitt, Ross & Stevens. I'm here representing Janine Landsinger as trustee for two trusts that are the owner of the Lot 5 Southtown Assessor's Plat property. I think it was accurately described on the agenda, and what we are here to request today is the certified survey map that has been submitted with the application for this property, which is 2101 West Broadway, currently where the Shopko store and its parking lot is located. That we have approval for that CSM submission. For any of you that may have been on the Plan Commission a year and a half ago, you may recognize it because in March of 2017, this same certified survey map was submitted. I was not involved at that point in time. Noah Prevey from Williamson Surveying did appear, as I understand, and he also prepared the CSM as well. Since that approval occurred in March of 2017, Janine was involved with some other projects and having some discussions with some of the property owners. And what ended up happening was the certified survey map was not recorded within the 12-month period that Wisconsin statutes call for. So we are back again requesting the same approval with what is virtually the same project. I tried to, in my letter of submission, address the conditions that were imposed or that were added in the 2017 approval, all of which we feel are appropriate for this time around as well. Public Works Committee approval, City Council approval, of course. There was a condition that there be a cross-access easement imposed across the remainder lot. I'm not looking at the certified survey map right now, so I don't have the lot numbers down. For the benefit of lots 1 and lot 2 across lot 3 to get to the West Broadway and the Gishold Drive portions of this. I think the next condition was that any future development of lots 1 and 2 meet the requirements of the city, which of course would be appropriate. There was a requirement that the reference to West Broadway be changed to West Broadway Frontage Road, which has happened. I sent a copy to Corey of a revised map, but I didn't get it to him in time to be included with your agenda. And finally, that there be a stormwater utility easement imposed on lots 1 and lot 2. And we're certainly, prepared to do that to result in the same sort of stormwater management as is currently the case with the single lot 5 of Southtown Assessor's Plat. So, briefly, the project, the reasoning for the project is much of this property to the north of the Shopko store and the Shopko parking lot is very underutilized parking space now. And with the blessing of the tenant and some of the other property owners in the area, we feel that we can, by bringing some additional sort of outlot type development, can energize this area further. Will be helpful to all of the retailers in the area if we're able to continue to drive traffic trips and the spending of money. So basically the same reasons as there were in 2017. So that's why I'm here.
Okay.
Take questions now or later on?
Thank you. We'll take questions in a bit.
Okay.
For right now, I want to know if there's anyone else here to speak relation to this public hearing on this particular request? No. Okay. Great. Then we'll close the public hearing and move to the consideration of action on request by property owner Janine Landsinger, represented by Noah Preve, Williamson Surveying, and Troy Main, attorney for DeWitt Ross, for approval of 3-lot certified survey map, CSM, to divide Lot 5 of Southtown Assessor's Plat, the Shopko lot at 2101 West Broadway, into 3 separate parcels. Case number 2-003-2017. Corey, do we have anything to report from the staff?
No, in your packet, I included the, what Sony had put together back in March of 2017, including the, as far as the additional condition on the stormwater, which Troy talked about. So nothing else to report.
Okay, great. Now we're open for discussion. Chris?
A question and a comment.
Yes.
You said it's substantially the same. What's changed?
What has changed
You
with?
said substantially the same request as it was a year and a half ago. Are you aware of anything that's changed?
No.
Okay,
No,
thank you.
no, there were
That-
two
my
two changes on the CSM were very, very minor, which were a change of the addressee, who it was prepared, who it
That's
was
all that
prepared for.
changed. You moved from what, California to Nevada or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right, and then you had some question as to why there was a condition on cross easements for the storm sewer. If you look, could we have the overhead projector? No, that's not what we call it. The document reader. Is that close?
Close enough.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Better.
What is it really called?
it's document camera.
Document camera, thank you. Okay, here is the CSM you're looking for. And if you go out there in lot 1, a lot of lot 3 drains, the storm sewer drains, there's an inlet right about in here. I would put it, it's hard to tell, but I'd put it right about somewhere in here in lot 1. So the water from lot 3 drains across and into lot 1, that storm sewer might get changed, but there still has to be some mechanism for the water from lot to get to lot. And there's another storm sewer inlet right about here, where a lot of this parking lot water comes across. So what you have a situation where you'll have different ownerships sharing storm sewer facilities. So you need to have something in place that allows them to share those, just like your cross easement access agreement.
Yep,
Make sense?
absolutely appropriate.
That's why we'd ask for that condition, is
Yeah.
to make sure that things are remaining the same, or that the different property owners can work it out and know if they have to work together on their storm sewer issues.
Yep, very good. That's,
Okay.
that gives me the detail that I need.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all I have. If it's the same thing, I don't have any other comments.
Okay, Kathy?
I'm fine.
I have no comment.
Rob, no comment? Chad?
As a veritable newcomer to this committee, I just want to ask the question of my colleagues. It is presumed that, when I look at this, that Lot 3 becomes the parking lot for the Shopko building. Is that correct?
Yes, lot 3 is currently the parking lot for the Shopko building, and will and that portion of it will remain, certainly that's the case. And
And when development, if this is approved and development is proposed, we will assure at that time that stormwater and parking requirements are being met for each of these parcels. Is that correct?
Chris?
Yes, that was the reason for the storm sewer. So it's one of them can't start blocking the other. You have people don't play well together in the sandbox. Your overriding question is, this is a large parking lot. All this is Shopko's parking lot right now. And what we looked at a year and a half ago, is there excess parking? So basically, we're creating outlots, just like where McDonald's is. Could
Yep.
there be another couple outlots? Could there be a retail business, a barber shop, whatever, or another restaurant? Sure. And we looked at that and we thought, we don't see that Shopko lot being fully utilized. We think there's excess capacity, so that's when we felt that this was appropriate to have those extra outlots carved off.
Okay, great.
And may I? Love your shirt tonight. Well done.
may I go on the record, and I love that shirt as well.
So I'm going to actually follow up, Chad, with your question, because I think the question is, we've been pretty meticulous as a committee ensuring that, particularly as it relates to stormwater, applies to each and every building. So you're saying, should other development occur, are we going to be looking at those at that time?
Yeah, it's a good point. And what'll happen at that point, we'll look at it, but they'll have to come to current standards. When Shopko was
Right.
built, they did not have infiltration. They
Right.
didn't have 40% TSS removal and things like that.
Right.
They will all be in place for this, because this will be a current approval for a new
Right.
project.
Right.
So yes, whoever would buy those sites would have all the current stormwater requirements,
Okay.
which aren't being met right now.
And Shopko as well?
No,
as-
no, they're still a grandfathered use.
Okay.
But any new use coming in would have to
Would have to
come under
meet
the
those
current
standards.
ordinance.
Okay, great. Good question, Chad. Brian?
No additional comments?
Susan? Griff?
No comment.
Okay. Great. That being the case, unless we have any other questions, do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval that we use this as our preamble and conditions, but it cites the ordinance and the reason, the authority we're doing it under. This is a copy of the old approval. It would be verbatim to the old approval.
Okay. Great. We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Griff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, public hearing on request by Zach and Brooke Kraus, 700 Interlake Drive for approval of private compensatory flood storage on public property along Interlake Drive. Please come up to the podium and tell us your name and address. Thank you.
Zach Kraus, 700 Interlake Drive, primary residence. We're dealing with a very unique situation, being in the flood storage district in the floodplain located on Interlake Drive. What we found out through multiple studies is that we currently have a water storage situation where we would have to remove about 1.5 feet of fill from our backyard, which would be facing the Ohio River, in order to offset the square footage to raise the house out of the flood storage district. That being said, what we're looking at doing is trying to offset some of that storage with an area across the street that we, my engineer Corey had pointed out could possibly be an area where we could offset the difference between where our property ends and where the street meets. So our essentially the area that is, what's the word I'm looking for? The
Right away.
yeah, the right of way. So what we're trying to do is just figure out how to situate the house and not remove a berm on the water side of the house. By having to remove that berm, we feel that would allow the flood water to upflow into the yard and then spill into our neighbors' yards for a couple of our neighbors that are even here tonight. So in order to keep that berm, we would need to offset about 75 cubic yards of fill across the street to offset the right-of-way and a small portion of our backyard that we don't want to remove a berm. This is kind of a unique situation where we're trying to find the best scenario without having to jeopardize the rest of the houses next to us by removing the fill from our backyard.
Do we have any immediate questions? Yep. I know we're still in public hearing. Is there anybody else that wants to speak on this particular issue that's here tonight?
Do they want to register in favor of them doing it? Because they can do that if you don't want to talk.
Right. If you don't want to talk, but you'd like to register in favor of or against, you're welcome to fill out an appearance card over there.
You can also appear without an opinion and simply propose questions or concerns.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. Having no one else come up, then I'd like to close the public hearing. And move to pre-hearing conference on the request by Zach and Brooke Kraus at 700 Interlake Drive for approval of private compensatory flood storage on public property along Interlake Drive. Corey, do you have anything?
Sure. Maybe not everybody got my staff report, but kind of a unique situation. Just on a side note, Zach and Brooke will also be going to ZBA next week. They, as part of the floodplain ordinance requirement, they need to have 15 feet of fill around their proposed structure. Just because of the size of the lots, they can't meet that. So they're going to ZBA next week to look for approval for that, for a variance. Sierra and I talked about this one. It's kind of a unique situation. Didn't really know what to do with it. So we wanted to bring it to Planning Commission. Since we put it together, we found out that the area across the road from Zach and Brooke is a public park, which is, the property is owned by Dane County, but it's considered an open space for the city of Monona. So lots of kind of some moving parts here as well, unusual requests, but this will also have to be approved by Public Works Committee, Park and Rec Board. Dane County would also have to approve this as well. And I also put in my staff report the comments from the Dan, as far as the Director of Public Works. They're looking at a project potentially down the road with Interlake that they want to keep open their options for that area. So we also had the Darren Pope from Bierbecker review the ZBA submittal as well as the submittal for the Planning Commission, and he responded with his comments. A lot more information is needed if it's decided that this is a suitable area. So a lot more information is needed from Zach and his engineer before anything would ever get approved.
Okay, thank you. Chris, questions from the committee?
I have a few. Corey, what do you feel is the authority of the Plan Commission on this item?
I'm not sure, just
Generally, we don't rule on single-family and two-family districts.
correct, or floodplain.
Yeah, we do floodplain. Actually, floodplain mapping has to go through
Okay.
here. Yes, absolutely. But individual items like that would generally be ZBA. I will say first, if the Director of Public Works doesn't want to allow your biobasin in the park, this commission has no authority to grant that. That would have to be Public Works and City Council to do something like that. So that's beyond the scope of any authority we would have. I do have a few questions though. It says in your thing, you're putting your home on stem walls. Explain that to me if you would, please.
Essentially what we're doing is taking, since we can't do the fill on the side of it,
Mhm.
we couldn't do a slab on grade,
Mm-hmm.
which would, essentially just do, a thickened edge around the house and raise it up.
So when you say stem wall, you just mean you're having a
I found
concrete wall that's,
that would go
but it's a
below.
solid concrete wall.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't know if maybe you're putting on piers like people do down in the Gulf Coast or something.
It was a
FGC
consideration.
makes me think of Gulf Coast, and they do a lot of, I'm sure you saw a lot of it when you were down there, they do a
Mhm.
lot of buildings, they actually set it up. And if you did that, you'd actually have less fill on your lot than you do right now. Because
Mhm.
right now, you've got a solid coming down through the floodplain, right? So if you would
Correct.
actually have a way to put it on piers, you would actually
Correct.
have less fill in a floodplain than you do right now.
Right.
Perhaps
Right.
you could do your garage with solid concrete walls and have a little, I don't know, a nice little walkway to the home, and the home could actually be on the piers. I don't know if you like that, but that would eliminate your fill, and you would actually have less fill under the footprint. The reason you have to do this, I sure, is because between your garage and your home footprint, they're bigger than the existing one.
Correct.
So you have to compensate for that. I mean, the
Correct.
other thing you could do, is take some out of your backyard. The berms, if I were the DNR, I would give you credit for, because I believe that was put in for flood control, and they didn't charge anything for that one that's put in, because they wanted to fix that area so that the whole neighborhood be safe. So were I the DNR, I would look at that and say, no, you don't get credit for taking that out, because we let you put that in without taking anything away. We did it for flood mitigation. I think that would be a hard thing to try to take some of that out right now. But it seems to me you have a couple ways you could do it on your property, perhaps, because I think it's gonna be tough to get Dane County and the city to give you parkland to be able to mitigate flood impacts for building a bigger footprint.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was just before we went too far, we
Sure.
wanted to know our options.
And
so
other
that's
things
what we were
on that,
looking
if
at.
it would ever get that far, you can't let water go untreated into the groundwater. And as close as groundwater is in there, you're obviously right in the groundwater. Even with that 2-foot bed of engineered soil, there's a lot of times that groundwater's gonna be higher than that, so it'd have to be a lined system. And that drain tile would have to have positive drainage to get out of there to be able to work as a biobasin, if that's what you're trying to do, a rain garden.
Mhm.
So that's just a detail, but I doubt we'll get that far, because the city would have to say, yeah, you can have our park and do your flood mitigation in there. But I would sure look at something you've seen a lot of, which is down in that area where they just build the home on piers.
Yeah, and we thought about that. We did do a soil study,
Mhm.
and the soil, we have issues with the soil, what the soil can support in that area. It's
Okay.
essentially seashells
Mhm.
and a breakdown of that.
But if you
so-
can pour 8-foot walls all the way around
Mhm.
and support it, you would be able to do this. I mean, you literally could have a whole slab underground with the piers coming out from it.
Mhm.
As long as you didn't have the fill in between the bottom of the house and that area, you'd be gaining storage for the flood storage.
Or not taking up as much space by having
You'd be
footprint
gaining
out.
probably because your existing home takes up flood storage.
Mhm.
And if that was now open, just the piers, you'd gain that, so even though your garage might be bigger, I bet you'd have a net addition of flood storage.
Right,
So
right.
maybe you could use that dirt then somewhere and balance it out to a net zero.
Mhm.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Again, I don't see that you'll be coming back to us. It's possible. We do rule on the 100-year flood elevation and mapping it, but unless this is a remapping of it, I doubt it would come to Plan Commission.
Right.
I mean, I feel for you. I think it's important to try to figure out ways to be able to upgrade the housing stock in that area. It does good for the neighbors, it does good for the city. I think
Mhm.
it'd be a great goal is to figure out a way to do this.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those, we got both of them, you know,
Yeah.
the flood storage district. And we did look at the piers. I think another concern was the air, the wind
Mhm.
that would go underneath it.
Sure. Can you take some more out of your backyard?
That was another consideration.
Just have
In-
a boardwalk out to the river?
They did a similar thing on Belle Isle with a house that did it.
Sure.
And they kind of did a
Yeah,
gully.
scoop it
and-
down, and then you can have a boardwalk through there. I mean, it's
Mhm.
not ideal for you, but there are
Right.
ways to do it to be able to build that home.
Mhm. Yeah, we're gonna look at all that,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Some creative ways of putting storage blocks underneath
Sure.
the driveway and
Sure.
maybe not pour a concrete driveway and have that permeable. So we're looking at a lot of it and how we can store that water on the property.
Sure.
And
Well, I wish you
try
the
to
best of
offset
luck.
that. So, thanks.
Any other, Kathy?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I mean, it's not
not
our thing. But I do have a question. How much
Mm-hmm.
of the parkland would you be taking or want to use?
It's about 80 cubic yards. It's about 15 feet long, about 4 feet deep, and then some engineered soil, so it'll only be about a 2-foot difference
I mean,
notice.
I smile when we call it a parkland because there wasn't much playing anybody could do in that when the flooding was going on because it filled with water. So you
Right.
put a swimming hole in it, but that's about it. And I think that everybody, when you have places like Belle Isle and Interlake, that all forms of government are going to have to be creative and think outside of the box for the benefit of the homeowners and the community. And so I wish you luck on that. I mean, I think we have to, you can't just, we have these rules that were put in place based on standards that existed before. Now we have a whole new situation. And so how do you do those so it makes sense to the property owners to maintain the property value and to the community?
Mm-hmm.
And the county has to be flexible, and we do too, but unfortunately, I don't think we're the group that we have to need to get flexible. And the question is, how much land does Dan need if he's gonna do it? Because he's gonna take, it's not gonna become parkland if the Public Works Department uses it.
You know,
So,
he
So
might
good
need it
luck.
for water quality too.
and don't, I mean, the city should cooperate, and so should the county. And hopefully they will.
We'll try to figure it out, yeah, definitely.
Any other creative ideas, since this is a pre-conference hearing, for him to take with him to other?
Well, I think the advice you were given at the beginning is really good, and I would just, I want to concur that it is going to be extremely unlikely that parkland will become a way for you to solve the problem. And I think the city is far more likely to be understanding and to work with you if you make a really sincere effort to deal with this on your own lot. I think the potential for some creativity there is by far the best way for you to approach it, because Public Works and the City Council, I just don't see, I chair Public Works, I know that committee pretty well. I don't think that we're likely to, because there's a whole block of properties there that have similar needs. And so, short of us taking that entire parkland and making it something that allows the rest of you to stay high and dry, I think you're wise to try to solve it within your property.
Okay.
And I think the piers are a great suggestion. So,
No puns intended, we'd be opening floodgates. Given that there is a whole neighborhood there.
yeah.
Yeah, it would make it difficult. Sorry? Yeah, Rob.
Chris, maybe you would have insight on this, but there's like underground water storage systems. Can those be used? Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like the
Yeah.
engineered
I do.
plastics
Um,
crates, basically?
Well, we
that
have
are-
some mixed metaphors. I mean, this that they're proposing would be a nice improvement to that area, because that area basically was dug down. I was part of it years ago, was dug down to help that neighborhood so it had less flooding. And that's why it's depressed like that. So this would be an improvement, but they don't need to do that. What they need to do is wherever the surface is, you have a flood elevation, right? And if somebody starts filling that, that puts more water somewhere else. So these flood areas are balanced. So if they choose to put some fill in the flood area, they're allowed to do it if they can mitigate it by taking some out of a flood area somewhere else. So underground storage, you're down below groundwater. It doesn't do anything to change the flood elevation,
Okay.
because the groundwater is just about to the surface there. So you have to find somewhere, if you're going to add dirt, to take it out somewhere else. And that's the balance they're trying to do. And
Could you
the
take out-
irony of it is, we're next to a massive wetland that we have. And what they're doing wouldn't amount to 1/100th of an inch of elevation change in that floodplain. Nobody would ever notice it for that little bit they're doing. But it's a hard and fast rule for the floodplain mapping, because where do you stop?
If you were to take something off that berm, could you put an alternate structure in to?
If they allowed the volume difference.
A flood wall,
you
basically,
could
is
put more
what
of a
I'm
wall in
talking.
and take
That's
some, yes, and you'd gain volume there. Any volume you can gain between
Can you
any existing
can you
ground
add that
level and the
wall
100-year
that
flood.
close to the shoreline?
If
Or maybe it's just a
if
permitting
upstream
process.
of ordinary high water, it'd be permitting through us, through the city. If it's below ordinary high water, it'd be the DNR's jurisdiction.
Okay.
But yes, anything you can do to add volume between the existing grade and the 100-year flood elevation, which, what is it there, 4767 or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
47.7 is on Monona. I think it's just a tweak smaller right
Yep,
there.
just by us,
Or
yep.
lower, I should say, yeah.
Mhm.
But
So-
how much higher did we go above that 100-year mark this year?
10 inches is
Oh.
what we heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we went up to 4854, I want to say.
Right.
So, yeah, we went quite a ways. We're above it right now. This is a
Right.
historic year.
Yeah.
Right now, today, I think, as of now, we're an inch and a half, 2 inches above it,
Right.
above 100-year. It's crazy. So anything you can do between 100-year and any existing ground level anywhere would compensate
Yeah.
for it. And I totally agree with your attempt at the variance, because the reason for the 15 feet out there is most homes, a lot of them, when they do this, they have a basement or something. So you want to keep that water away from the foundation wall. In your case, you're not putting the basement in, correct?
Correct.
So all you have is a foundation wall. So that rule, that regulation we have, that you have to have at least 15 feet of soil above that elevation coming out, that's to protect that foundation wall, so the water's not sitting up against it. Right now, there's nothing below it. Is it an issue for you? It could be, the soak's under there, it could be a little wetter under the floor, but you're not flooding any habitable area. So, no, I'm just saying, so it's a good case for a variance, because the reason for it doesn't really pertain to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Any other creative ideas, questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to number 7. Reports of staff and commission members. First up, we have a staff report regarding the status of development for project proposals. And specifically, we have Ben here from Vanderwall, updated and discuss the sign code revisions. Ben?
Good evening. I'm Mike Slavny with Vanderwall, and Ben Rohr is with me also. We're here to update you on the progress we've made on the draft sign code rewrite. To refresh your memories, you assigned a highly qualified subcommittee to direct our work, and they've gone beyond directing our work to really customize our model to meet your needs. I would say that your current sign regulations are antiquated, but through the policies and actions of the Plan Commission and the Council, you're getting very sophisticated results. And in a nutshell, I would say that this rewrite is designed primarily to preserve what you've historically been doing, but to do so in a way that complies with that 2015 Supreme Court decision that prohibits sign regulations being based on the content of the sign, like a real estate sign or a garage sale sign. We've talked about that before. And I think this draft code, by and large, does do that. Ben and I have put together a memo dated October 8th that really provides an outline of the proposed changes. And this reflects the meetings we've had with the steering committee and coordination with staff. And then we've also provided the draft text, which says draft on it. It's about 23 pages long. And then part of that are these new tables where the number, height, dimensional requirements are presented on 4 different pages. The first page regulates business signs that are permanent. The second page, business signs that are temporary. We have then permanent and temporary non-business signs. And this is a way for most sign applicants to not have to crack open the code, but to get the regulations straight from the tables. And then finally, we were asked to suggest an alternative to the overlay district that you currently use to distinguish where pylon signs can be and where they cannot. And we provided a draft map that is based on which public streets properties have frontage on, and also provides an exception for very large sites with long frontages to enable a taller and larger sign. And again, the intent here is to the extent possible, reflect the rules that you've had in place for many years. And we have done that. I believe that one extra property is enabled for the regular-sized pylon signs way on the west edge of the south side of the Beltline corridor by using that street frontage method. I was surprised that we could get so close a match using something as simple as a street frontage definition. Throughout the proposed text and the proposed tables, we're using color coding to help define what kind of changes are really made from your current code. The yellow areas of the table and the text recognized where we took a new organizational approach. The blue areas are added substantive text, and the green areas are totally new sections. Most of those green areas have been added because we've added some new sign types that are currently not directly addressed by your code. Some of them are common and are pedestrian-oriented. Some of them you don't really have any historic precedence for, like a marquee sign, but it's, a possibility. So we wanted to make sure that they were addressed. Maybe just to focus a little bit on the process. So the process would be, after today's meeting, to gather any input that you have tonight and make any changes that you suggest. We would then provide all revised drafts to your staff, including the city attorney. The city attorney needs to, we're dealing with a constitutional issue. I think the blessing of the city attorney is a good idea. We would make any changes required as a result of that review. And then if we're ready, bring it to a public open house where we can answer questions on a one-on-one basis by people dropping in and asking, rather than a formal public hearing process. That hopefully will help us identify issues that perhaps we did not address, or issues that might be unique to an individual. We can then discuss those with staff and see if we need to come back here to make any last revisions before we go to the public hearing process, which we would anticipate being in a few months from tonight. So if I could, what I'd like to do is just summarize the specific changes that were, I think, most important in our process. The first of those changes is we've identified a category of temporary signs called yard signs. And these would be most of the signs that property owners put on their property or on some of the streets in the city within the right-of-way, terrace. You used to be able to address those by what the content of the sign was, and we can't do that anymore. So we've tried to identify several ways of constructing that temporary sign that you're seeing now in practice, the dual wire kind of sign, the single stake kind of sign, the arm and post real estate sign would fit into those categories. We've clarified the exact locations in terms of setbacks of pylon signs that historically I think you've been finessing in part through site plan and sign permit approvals. We have clarified, I believe, rules for non-conforming signs. And some of those non-conforming signs were non-conforming under your previous code. And they're signs from a different era that date way back. I think that your staff and yourselves had identified good rules for addressing those signs, but they were never really codified in the code, so we're doing that for the first time. We've also clarified rules for electronic message signs, and the draft code identifies both land uses and locations where those would be considered. And then finally, this code signals a preference for new signage that's on walls to not be plastic cabinet signs, but to rather be comprised of freestanding individual letters that together comprise a message and either have internal illumination or are backlit to provide kind of a silhouette of the sign. And again, I think reflecting a lot of what the city has been getting, but something that wasn't directly addressed to this extent in the current code. I didn't intend to walk through the 23 pages or the 4 pages of tables unless you want me to. Rather, maybe it would be most appropriate if anybody first has any questions. If we get those cleared up, we could then take any suggestions or other recommendations from you.
Rob, go ahead.
I just have a quick question before it escapes me. You were just talking about the lighting of the signs for the businesses, how they would be internally lit or backlit. Is that, can you point me to where that, does it, can you not do like gooseneck lighting or?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes,
it doesn't
yes,
limit them to,
correct.
okay, that was my question, just since it
Yeah,
just came up.
number 5 in that first table, number 5 talks about individual channel letters,
Okay,
backlit,
there it is.
gooseneck, like ambient lighting forms. Just clarifies those. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I have two things just to, I guess, toss out there. One is I'm very appreciative of adding the yard sign category. On the other hand, I'm looking at one per lot as being the recommendation in this, and I'd say probably 50% of Monona would be in violation of this sign code right now. It's just, I just don't know how realistic that is, and I'm a big believer in not creating ordinances that we're not prepared to enforce. And so I wonder if that needs to be revisited, because even without politics, if somebody puts a slow down, children play here or whatever, I mean, it's very easily eclipsed.
Doesn't it allow one per candidate?
Yes. Number 5 on that.
It allows one sign per candidate during an election.
2 per
2
referendum.
per referendum
Well, 'cause
issue.
two people in the household might have different opinions.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at the temporary miscellaneous sign group where it says one per lot.
Yes, so there's a footnote for that.
Okay,
So
sorry.
is your concern the placement or the number?
Both. I mean, yeah.
And I think that, we too, I think, share your concerns about, what do you do with the right of way and what do you do, but you're not supposed to put them in the right of way, and for us to legally tell them they can do that doesn't seem appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Can we always enforce it? No, but sometimes it blocks vision or it's on the other side of the sidewalk, and at least you have the ability to say, move it. That the placement of them is a real conundrum, I think, because how do you know where the right-of-way is on the land, sticking to that kind of thing, but you have to have some kind of standard.
Right, but isn't, if I'm reading this correctly, isn't the minimum 5 foot behind back of the curb, isn't that automatically in the right of way anyway? I mean, most of the right of way is wider than 5 feet,
A lot
so
of
you're
times it
still
is.
allowing the right of way.
That's the problem, is because you go on Winnequa, and it's the right-of-way, people don't know, it goes back there 30, 40 feet. So those
Right.
people couldn't put a sign up. So we
Right.
had to come up with something,
Okay.
normal sign ordinance, in fact, the way it was first written was it has to be on your property. And we
Right.
recognize Monona Drive, there's a lot of areas where we have really wide right-of-ways, so we have to do something to allow them to put in the right-of-way, but keep it
Okay.
some kind of a thing, so,
Okay.
and that's why it's 5 feet from a curb and 1 foot from a sidewalk, so that if it does get too close and it blocks view or something, then the city has the ability of going, hey, you gotta just pull those back a little bit. But it still allows people to put it out in the right of way where they want someone to see it.
Okay.
As far as the numbers, we struggle with that mightily, but that's why we're able to come up with, where you believe it's legally enforceable, that you can do
One per.
one per candidate
Yep.
and 2 per referendum.
Yep.
Which gets us past
Sure.
that thing where you'd have 20 signs in these yards up and down the rest of the year. And
Right.
I don't know if 1 is the right number for the rest of the year. The
Right.
good news is, We have to come up with a recommendation, and we send it to council. They
Right.
get to decide.
And you guys have to do it.
Right,
And no matter what you do,
right,
somebody's,
Sure.
because people don't look at the candidates don't look. They're supposed to get a listing of what they can do with their signs.
right,
Or the no things, but
right.
it's sort of, if it becomes a problem, then you have a standard which you can apply.
Sure. I appreciate that, yeah.
We've got the most experience with this new code in the Village of Oregon, which has about 10,000 people and, similar resources to what the city has. And they were concerned about the enforcement of temporary signs, and particularly yard signs. And they worked out a sticker that they placed on the back of signs that were either placed not in conformance with the new code, or if there were, outside of the election periods, too many of those signs. And it identified that the sign didn't comply and provided the rule for yard signs. And I think they had a 6-month grace period where it was about education, not about rigid
Right.
enforcement. They trained the village employees who are out on the streets, so Public Works and police in particular. And I think they've been very happy with that effort. One trick about being a consultant is to steal good ideas from one place and use
Right,
them
sure.
in another. And I thought that was a really effective public relations approach, as well as something that drove compliance over time.
Great. My other question was just in relation to the temporary board and banner sign category, which is noticing that feather signs, which I know haven't been allowed previously, are still not allowed, and that sandwich boards, we're seeing one for each business, display limit of 30 consecutive days, 2 times per calendar year. And I'm just, I see, maybe it's just me, but it seems like the feather signs in particular and the sandwich boards have become, I guess I want to say more popular or more desirable, especially in higher traffic areas where a smaller sign, people can't read it or see it. And so I'm wondering what the discussion of the committee was around those. And I'm noticing it more with realtors too. I just saw one for an open house this weekend.
That's a good question. It bears a lot of discussion. We've never allowed sandwich boards before in Monona. So this
Right.
would be a big leap to allow sandwich boards, and a lot of people seem to want them. And I guess somehow he talked us into it. And then the feather boards, anything that goes like that, we decided not to allow because it would be distracting for drivers. So
Right.
anything that moved in the wind or attracted attention like that, you don't need that when people are trying to, we're hopefully keeping their eyes on the road. So that was the distinction.
Okay.
And we did think that, we all love being reminded that Immaculate Heart is having their fish fry.
Yep.
We think that's wonderful, that there's going to be a fall festival.
Right.
But you wouldn't want every business and along the drive to have a sandwich board sign out.
It's allowed now. With this sign
Well-
code, it's
well,
allowed for 30 days, twice a year.
30 days twice a year, but they wouldn't be up. It's unlikely they'd all be up at the same time.
Correct.
Right. Right. And I'm just was wondering what the committee discussion was, because as I said, I just know that not necessarily the thing that looks like Gumby.
Did I do a good job of that?
You were just doing a really good job, yes.
And I don't bend that easy.
But the feather banners in particular, I just am noticing more and more of them, and I'm assuming that's because they're effective, and so I just, because I know they're fairly expensive to produce, so I just didn't know what the discussion was in committee, that's all. Just wanted to hear more about what you were thinking around that.
Anti-gaudy.
Yeah, I think we just didn't think we liked the looks of them, and we didn't think they were necessary. and it's hard, you know, if you don't like the Gumby looking one, well, what one is, I mean, it's, you know, either you have them or you don't, I think, and we just decided not to.
Nancy?
Nancy.
Yeah.
To that point, I agree. I think they look tacky and cheap, and if they don't look cheap, they look cheap after a little while in the sun. I think the more temporary signs you have, especially in commercial areas, the more massing of signs you have, it detracts from the character of that commercial area. And I would I'd put sandwich boards right in that category. Everybody loves a beautifully drawn chalk sandwich board with nice art on it, but a lot of them are just white with black letters, and I'd put them in that category, and I'd just as soon not see them.
So the guy that has the, just to your point, Rob, so the guy that's selling vegetables, you know, in a parking lot all summer long with a sandwich board.
Put a big sign on
Currently.
his truck.
Yeah.
Well, but there has been a sandwich board previously, at times, right?
Yeah, in general, I'd
right.
say I
You
don't.
don't want that,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
I'd say more often than not, they don't look.
Yep.
They look cheap and temporary.
Or they look any fancier on the truck, but that's okay. So, yeah, Chris.
If I could, I'd like to take a step back.
Yeah.
This is really the first time this draft has ever been before the Plan Commission,
Uh-huh.
and we should be talking about all this stuff.
Right.
I mean, there's a ton in here. I mean, number one, it's a job well done, but it's complicated. There is a lot of information here. I
I
am
know.
so glad you weren't looking for any kind of final, yeah, this is it or this isn't it, because, I mean, I sat in all these meetings. I have dozens of questions.
Right.
Dozens of things circled already, and I was part of this. So
Right.
there is a lot of information here. We should be talking about this. This is a
Right.
good discussion. Should we have sandwich boards? We've never allowed them before. This
Right.
is a big change for us.
Right.
But we've had them, we just haven't.
We've had them, we
followed
haven't enforced tearing them down all the time.
Right.
And so people have been very judicious on where they put them. But
Right.
now, when we open the proverbial floodgate, then are there going to be sandwich boards up and down Manoa Drive? And is that what we want as a community? I mean, that's an important question.
Right.
Important question for us. It's an important question for the council.
Right.
And all these signs, all the way through this thing, we should sit here, we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. I know you just soon get home, but there's a lot of information on this
Right.
thing.
Right.
And a lot of changes, there's a lot of things, I must not have been here for some of it, 'cause some of these things, I'm like, well, I don't agree with that. So, there's lots to talk about here
With that
tonight.
as a prompt, for which I thank you, let me just back up to say, you know, that I recognize that this is a ton of work.
It is.
And that it has been a ton of work for the subcommittee that's worked on it, and it represents gigantic step forward. I mean, I'm reminded of when Dale was on this committee, and you know, he was hoping we would get to a code that we'd never even have to see a sign in front of this committee,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
code would be so dialed that the staff could, right? Am I right about that?
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is, you know, I don't think that we'd be, you know, we're erasing our responsibility there, and but it represents a huge step forward, for which I thank not you guys, and definitely the subcommittee. So, great step forward. Yeah.
You know,
What else?
part of the, I was gonna say, part of the, Chris and I remember when we went through you can't put your pylon signs out by the curb, they have to be how close to the building? And when people, and that was a big deal. And the question comes up when you're doing signs, are you doing advertising or are you doing location? What's the purpose of the sign?
Right.
And what are, and it's about community values and community standards, because you want businesses to be successful.
Right.
You just don't want them to,
Right.
and sometimes they have the dumbest ideas about what will make them successful. But,
Sure.
and so, and I think that's the problem with the sign code is, you want them, I mean, I just had somebody from Cozy Home that says people come up and they come off the drive and they can't see our sign when they're coming past, and they want to put something on the side of the building because people are past them
Mm-hmm.
when they're trying to turn in. And so what do you let businesses do so
Right.
people coming in from out of town can locate them?
Right.
And that's sort of, I think, was our underlying philosophy when we went through the signage thing. I and it certainly was mine, but would be fair and reasonable to businesses so they could be successful and still the drive and Broadway would look good and look attractive. Because
Sure.
we make them go through all these machinations about what to do with their buildings to make it look good.
Right.
And then they take it away with the signage.
Well, and certainly from a political sign or other yard sign standpoint, I mean, I would argue the same thing, which is to say, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would find the political signs not something particularly attractive in everybody's yard. And on the other hand, I think as a community, you know, we want to support a participatory democracy, right? So I think it's a good thing to have them there, where there might be some communities, as there are condo buildings and other things, where you can't put a sign in your window or you can't put, right? So I
Yeah,
think it's
I-
always a trade-off.
I kept, well, not lots, but probably at least half a dozen people call me and complain because they don't like how many signs we have up that say slow, you know, down kids, and then have advertising underneath. Because they think that's a cheap way to get advertising for people.
Can't regulate that, can we?
Other comments,
No,
questions?
we did wrestle with the yard sign thing because we know that, saying one, I mean, there are a lot of houses that have two that they keep up pretty much all the time. If you do the one, we believe in science, and then the slow down. I mean, that's pretty common to see those two.
Right?
And we just didn't really, we kind of figured we'd let you guys wrestle with it because we, and then also, you know, it was always clear, certainly from the first time I ran, that you did not put signs in the terrace area where there's a sidewalk. And that's real common now with all these slow down ones. They're all in the terrace. And some people would put their, you know, rarely, I mean, I had a complaint. I had somebody call me because one of mine got knocked down by a snowplow and ended up being put up. You couldn't even see where the terrace was in this particular corner, and it was in the terrace. So I moved it because we generally did pay strict attention to that as candidates. And now with the plethora of slow down signs that are all over the city that we have seen complaints about, the numbers of them, a lot of those are in the terrace. So there again, it goes to your question of if you're going to put it in the ordinance,
Right.
you know, it's
And of course, I'm sure
an
the
issue.
people that have the slow down signs would say, well, if you put it back
People
very far in the
see-
yard, it defeats the purpose because the car won't necessarily see it. You know,
Right.
and that's.
And
the
in
whole
some
point,
areas, I
right?
think we thought that was
Um,
true. I mean, because that's why we wrestle with it. Some areas have where there's brush that comes where they have a very narrow yard at the front. It's, Monona, because it has so many different types of lots too, it was a difficult question. But
Right. Any other questions, comments, especially for, yes?
Okay, so a couple of things. This was on the agenda, and so it was brought up at the staff meeting with all the department directors, and believe it or not, they are all very interested in what is coming out of this, particularly Parks, Police, and Public Works. So the proposed setbacks that we have, the 5 feet behind the curb or 2 feet behind a sidewalk if there's a sidewalk present, in some situations where that might technically be in the right of way, which is why we tried to get a numbers standard. On first pass by the directors, they are all very comfortable with that. They like that they have a number that they can enforce instead of trying to figure out where property lines are. So they feel like that's very enforceable. The sticker idea, the police were in favor of, because if a sign gets pulled by Public Works, they don't want residents calling and saying someone stole my signs. So it gives them a reason for why their sign's not there, keeps it on property, but just have enforcement be pull it out of the ground, lay it down, tell them that it's not up to code, and if they want to know why, they can contact us and we can tell them how to be conforming with it. So that was some positive feedback. One other issue that I wanted to discuss as a planning commission was the wall signs, because I've had a couple calls since Sonia has left regarding wall signs, and the language says one for each business on each building facade that abuts a public street frontage. And so 2 examples, Cozy Home, like you said, they talked to you, they've also talked to us, and Fabroni's, they technically don't have a second side that abuts a property, but they do have a side of the building that is visible from the drive. So like Fabroni's, they closed their second location on Regent Street. They wanted to take the wooden sign from there and put it on the side of their building that faces Monona Drive.
They would
Because
need to
the-
come to Plan Commission and ask for a variance for that.
So you want to keep it as a variance. I just wanted to make sure like that's the language that we want to be enforcing, because a lot of the Monona Drive properties, like Cozy Home, they want to have something so that the drivers can see it as they're going past.
It's mostly when people are drawing businesses or customers from out of the city. And Fraboni's is a prime example, because they close that store and people are coming and they're not so sure where to turn.
Yeah.
You know, you can say the second light, but it's not so easy to see. And the same thing with Cozy Home, and once you go past it. And I think they were willing to do it on the wall sign, but I think they were told that the size they wanted to do was too big. I don't know how
They
big.
wanted 300 square feet.
I don't know how big 300 square feet is, but
It's large. We only, I think ours is what, 100 square feet is the maximum, 150?
Yeah.
100.
I just want to remind everybody that whatever we put in here, it's a race to the top. If we say you can put 12 signs on, every business will want 12 signs. If we say you can be 12 foot tall, everybody will want to be 12 foot tall. That's what we used to have in Monona Drive, and it looked a bit like a Las Vegas Strip 25 years ago. And if you could remember back to then and to now, with everybody down at the same elevation, nobody has an advantage. And so when we start saying, well, you can have 3 signs, you could have 8, you start having that competitive disadvantage, if you will. I mean, I'm not saying we don't do it, we've done it a lot, but that's the kind of thing where I think you need to do more than have the pressure on staff to allow an extra sign or two. I think that's a very awkward position for staff. Even for when Sonia was very experienced in here and knew exactly how the commission felt, I think it was hard for her to sit there and say, no, you can't have a sign, without being able to say, well, no, you have to let the commission do that.
Great. Do we have any other discussion for this evening?
I have a
before we
whole
move?
load.
Yes.
Can I start? Because I mean,
Yeah,
I have
sure.
a ton of stuff that we
Okay.
should talk about, I think.
Okay.
I don't even know where to start.
Didn't know how deep a dive we were doing tonight, but dive away.
I'm gonna start on our zoning sheet you sent out with all, and by the way, I gotta tell you, with old eyes, this really dark color coding makes it the devil to read that text. I'm like, what the heck? I got out a magnifying glass with a light on it to read some of it. Okay, I'm gonna start on page 1, where it talks, where the blue highlighting, item 3, we changed this because before you could only have one flag on a property. So, well, that's silly. Somebody might want to have, the U.S. flag and a Monona flag and a Brewers flag or something. Well, that's silly. So you can't have a flag, or it can only be a 4x6. So we changed it. But now I go through the definition of a sign, and it says a city, or I would say a city or a state or a U.S. flag would not be a sign. So we allowed all these, but now they aren't signs. So now what did we allow? We allowed 3 flags, so we allowed 3 in addition to the U.S. flag and the state flag. Am I right? Because the way I read this is different than what I understood when we were in committee. It says that signs do not include flags which do not contain a commercial message, commercial logo, or commercial color. So then we've just gone from allowing 3 flags, we're saying U.S., state, and WPS was our example. And it looks great. But to say 3 commercial messages now, I think is too much.
I think we missed that.
I think we did
we
too.
had an
That's why I thought I
agreement on
wasn't at the
3.
meeting.
Yeah. I think we agreed 3 signs was.
3 flags.
3 flags.
3 flags.
3
3 flags was enough,
flags.
but I thought the US flag was included in that.
That's correct.
Okay.
We'll correct that.
Right, so, and so that's something new though, something everybody should be aware of and say, hey, if that's a problem, we shouldn't do that. But we thought, somebody should be able to put a fun flag up. I think on some of our properties we fly Packer flags.
What I was gonna say. so
Brewers,
you could do
Packers,
that.
whatever. But I think it's fun and I think it's spirit and I don't think it's bad for a site. And if somebody has one WPS flag or Chad's Carpentry flag, I don't have a problem with that. But I think 3 would be a lot. 3
In addition.
Hamburg Contractors flags would be too much on one site. If there was a U.S., see, I didn't
In
use your
addition
name
to
on that one.
yes.
If there was a U.S. flag and a Wisconsin flag and then a company flag like WPS does, that's what we use for our example. We didn't even allow it in our sign code.
Okay, so if you're saying 3 flags, do we mean 1 advertising flag plus 2 other signs?
Well,
I thought that was.
that's
what
kind
we
of our gist, but
discussed.
so this is different now.
That
Because
isn't what it says.
that's
So-
not what our code says now. Our code says those other 2 aren't a flag, and you can have 3 flags later on a site, which will allow you 3 advertising flags. That wasn't our intention.
So you can have up to 3 flags with 1 commercial flags, is that what you're saying?
That was my understanding of what you wanted.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, so we just need to
We
touch
didn't
that up.
close that loophole, so
Okay,
we will.
thanks. And
So
while we're
it's
on,
commercial.
while we're on that page, number 4 talks about wall murals, wall murals,
Wall art?
wall murals. I'm sorry.
Well, so a sports team is
A commercial?
a commercial.
I don't know, is it?
No, it's, to me, the.
That's not,
the
is that a commercial logo?
No, that would be an off-premise logo.
Well, it's not off premises.
No, I'm just saying it's not
Because
considered.
then if the maximum is 3, and we're not saying, and we're saying only 1 can be commercial, then that means that somebody couldn't be flying Badgers and Green Bay Packers at the same time.
Well, then you relate it to the business. Well, I don't consider a Packer, a Brewer, or a Badger sign a commercial sign necessarily.
I mean, we're asking the question, I'm not.
Right.
sure.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah, I-
asking the questions.
I thought our point was just 3 signs. So it could be an American flag, a Packer sign, and a
I'm an
Brewer
expert
sign.
here.
if you
Let's
want.
ask him.
Right? Isn't that
Yes,
what,
right.
I thought that's what we
Right.
said. It doesn't have to be a state flag, an American flag, and
Okay,
one
no.
other one.
But I don't want 3 WPS signs on the
I don't think they would put 3 WPS.
Well,
I mean,
but I don't want them to have.
But I think there might be people who would put a Packer sign and a Brewer sign
Sure.
with an American flag. I think,
That's
I mean,
fine.
flags, I'm sorry. And I think that's fine, but then you'd have to,
I wouldn't
make a
consider a
distinction
brewer
for-
sign an advertising sign.
Can we
I-
just go
I
back to what
wouldn't
the
either.
committee said, that we can have up to 3 flagpoles?
that, yeah,
and
that's
fly
all
what
we,
you
I
want?
thought we wanted to say was,
That's what I thought the
right.
instructions.
And not specify
Is that all right?
national, state, or whatever.
Do we care if someone would put 3
I just don't think that would
advertising
happen.
signs? I'm just asking.
It will be a problem, because somewhere somebody will put some silly advertising, because we can't have their little Gumby sign, so I'll have it on a flag instead.
I don't think, I don't know.
So that's why my original question was, are something like team logos considered commercial? And would you define that as commercial?
So we could define that team logos are not regulated as commercial
Perfect.
signs.
Just put a footnote.
So we
in.
could say that any flag of the nation, state, county, city, and any sports logos are not considered commercial signs, and you are limited to 1 commercial, flags. And
Got it.
you're,
So can I put up a Swedish sign?
yeah, no bear signs, or flags, but I think
No, but you were saying United States state.
Well, people do that
So
now.
if I want to put up an
Yeah.
Italian sign,
Sure.
Should be able to do that. There's
well,
gotta
the
be
way
broader
that I
representation.
think we could write it how you would like to
Per the
have it.
Supreme Court ruling, can we write it like that?
If
flag?
you consider flags you have to define what is a sign and what isn't.
Okay.
So we could say you're allowed up to 3 flags, and 2 of them can be non-commercial messages.
Okay.
One of which can be a commercial message. We can do that.
And does that, would that permit someone to put up a Confederate flag?
Sure.
Well, it depends on whether your city
Why
attorney
not?
says that's hate speech or not.
Good. That's one thing we don't have to look at then, or deal with.
Okay.
Confederate, can I put up?
I don't know. Can somebody put up a Nazi flag? I have no idea.
That would be hate speech.
That would be.
That would be? Okay. Well, then maybe,
Confederate?
That could be.
Could be.
Depending on what Bill Cole says.
gosh, let's keep that out of the plan commission, can we please?
Yeah, can we? Yeah. What else?
Let the
Chris?
council deal with that.
Yeah.
But people do put up other nationalities' flags.
Does everybody agree that that's a
Yeah,
good solution to
that's- I don't
do
think
the,
That's a problem.
how you just spelled it out?
We get another kick at it, that's the fun part, once it's all put together.
For
That was one
now,
of my
does
greatest-
everybody feel comfortable?
What have the other cities done in terms of allowing flags?
They've had a limit on total flags, and 2 or 3 is typical.
And they don't, this,
Don't worry about it.
And they have prohibited typically any commercial message on a flag.
So 3, so where we stand now is saying 3, and only one of the 3 can be a commercial message. That, I think I don't know if you'd need a footnote too to specify that team flags are not, I
I
don't know
don't
whether you
know
need
either.
that.
Well,
I don't-
that'll be one of the first questions, I think.
I would think it
that's-
would be, so.
I think it'll be asked on a regular basis. I think you should, if we know what we want to do, we
Right.
should say it.
But
Yeah,
you can't,
if
I
it
mean,
fits in
WPS
there.
has a WPS sign up now. You
Like-
can't take your largest employer and say, take that sign down and see
Well,
what,
We wouldn't
no,
be.
we didn't want to. I mean, that was not what we were, well, you might.
And that's why.
Right,
what the other cities have done doesn't work for us.
right.
That's right. And just to clarify for those listening at home, any sign now up or any flag now up would be, that's made illegal by this new code when it's adopted, would stay up as a legal non-conforming flag or sign. This ordinance would not require anybody to take down something that's already established.
Okay, number one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Still on that page, item number 4, it talks about artworks, including but not limited to wall murals. We've always struggled with wall murals. Is that a sign? If I take the side of my building and put a big dozer on there, is that a sign or is that a work of art? Am I advertising my business or am I putting up a work of art? I don't know the answer to that. I know I had a lot of people ask me when the dance studio that's gone now, where Cozy Home is, put a big mural of a ballerina there. Is that advertising? That's saying, here we are, come see us. Was it offensive? I don't know that it was, but some people said, how come they can do that? So where are we on wall murals? We've never really talked about it. That's a tough one.
So this draft code says if the wall mural depicts an activity or product that is offered on site, then it is a sign.
Right.
Okay. Do we want murals up and down? I mean, they're cool. They really are. But do you want a mural on every building? Where do you start and where do you stop? I have no idea. I don't have the answer. I just have a question, and it should be discussed.
It's been, having written about 50 of these, I would say that distinction has allowed public art to go forward, but it prohibits murals that are described as public art, but in the end, it's a commercial for the activities
That
or
makes
products
sense to me.
offered.
Okay.
That we make that distinction.
Okay.
I would agree.
On to page 2, number 7, interior building signs located on the interior of a building and not attached to or located within 3 feet of the inside of a window, which are primarily oriented to persons within the building. So that's one where we got Walgreens up on Monona Drive and Flom, and we only allowed so many signs, so they've done this in many, many communities. They have that nice glassed-in area right behind there. They put up the signs that we said they couldn't have. This doesn't say they can do it, but and it's not a horrible sign, but do we regulate that?
Right, so that practice, or, Kaiser Ford's used car
Yeah, a lot of people do it.
building has that big sign suspended from the ceiling. Under the way the rule, this is written right now, those signs would be allowed because they're more than 3 feet inside the building.
Okay.
And the difficulty comes if we say any sign that can be seen from the outside of the building. If I look in the grocery store's window and see a product sign through the window, or a hardware store, almost any kind of retail operation, that becomes a rule that's impossible to enforce.
It is, I agree. It's just, we have to be aware of it. I know we all went when it happened the first time. I'm already through those pages. I will tell everybody, if you haven't had a chance, these 4 sheets right here, this is the meat and potatoes. And there is a ton of information here. And I'm not sure I read through it all well, but I have a few questions on it. Starting with the permanent business sign group, that'd be our first big one. B1 wall sign, footnote 8. Says the bottom of the sign shall be 14 feet above a drive alley. Well, we have a lot of buildings where the wall sign's not 14 feet in the air. And there might be a sidewalk right there. Some of the architecture now, we're pushing buildings forward. And I'm not sure if for that particular category, if it's a wall sign that doesn't protrude more than 18 inches, if we have to have that 14-foot height on there, and what we do to change that.
Right, so this is a very common provision, and it might even be in your current code.
Why, though, is the question.
So typically, this is a question for the Public Works Director or a streets person. 14 feet is a very typical clearance, but I've seen 12 feet in other communities, or 11 feet. And that's, again, above a location where vehicle traffic is present. If it's pedestrian traffic, we can allow signs to
8
come
feet.
lower.
It says 8 feet above like other. but-
Sidewalk, patio, ground level surface, so that would be your typical scenario where there isn't an automobile underneath it.
No, it says 14 feet for a parking space or other vehicle surface.
Yeah, where there is a vehicle underneath it,
It's
then
gotta
we
be
raise it to
14,
14.
and that's the
then
case where some of ours are really tight. If it's a 5-foot sidewalk in front of a business, that's all they got. It's got an 18-inch overhang, and the sign's there. Does this really have to be 14 feet, or can it be, you know where I'm going with it. It could be a difficult one. I agree, if it's right above a street or a public surface, absolutely. But when it's above a parking stall, do we need it always 14 feet high?
Well, the question I have is
Bottom?
if you would most often do it 14 feet, if they need an exception, they can come and ask, yeah, they
Okay,
not.
because some of our buildings don't, you're 14 feet to the bottom, you're talking 16, 18 feet, and some of our buildings aren't that tall. A lot of them aren't that tall on the facade.
But wouldn't they, if that's a reasonable standard in the norm,
Okay,
then,
Right.
then my question would be, then if somebody needs an exception when they come in for the signage, they can ask for an exception.
They could, and typically you would allow it to come down if there were bollards that
okay,
push the traffic out away from the edge of the sign.
okay. I can live with all this. I just want to be clear on it.
Yeah, and that's certainly something we could bring up with the Public Works
Okay.
Director and highlight.
Well, no, I think when it's above a public street or alley or whatever, totally keep it up there at that 14, but that's a typical height. C1, blade sign. So if y'all look at what a blade sign looks like over 4 down on the right, that's a fairly small sign, and it says we allow gooseneck lighting on that. How do you gooseneck lighting on a little blade sign like that? And do we want that? Does that come off the 2 sides and down on
Yeah.
it? Do we need it? Because the other ones like that have ambient. If you look at the suspended sign, the next one down and to the left, that has no, just ambient lighting. Do we need lighting on a blade sign? These are new sign types we haven't allowed before. You understand? These are signs in addition, but they kind of,
Isn't there blade signs on Trista?
Yeah.
and we allowed that as an exception,
Oh,
absolutely. Because it hasn't been in our code before, but do we need gooseneck lighting? I'm gonna ask on a blade sign. That's more of a pedestrian scale, kind of that ambiance type of thing. Do you need lighting on that, and how would that look?
You don't need lighting. Sometimes it's used.
Okay.
I think the distinguishing characteristic is, these are
Right.
pedestrian-oriented signs.
Right.
And if it's a business that typically operates past dark, they have the choice of using gooseneck or no lighting whatsoever.
I think
And-
the gooseneck is.
In that same category, why are we allowing 12 square feet for a suspended sign and 6 for a blade sign? 12 square feet to me, for a pedestrian scale sign, you're talking about a 2x6. That would be a huge sign suspended down for pedestrian scale. I'm wondering why we doubled it on that one. Or did we?
I don't recall. What's your preference?
Yeah, I don't, that sounds large to me. It doesn't, I'm not recalling that we did want it. anything
Well,
that large
and
for
if we did or
pedestrian
didn't, it
signs.
doesn't matter. What's the
Well, no,
commission's preference?
I think it sounds large. So the,
That's a big sign,
yeah.
12 square feet, for
Right.
pedestrian scale hanging
Yeah, in
down
fact,
from
I
the
thought-
Yeah, your
canopy.
current code has projecting maximum 12.
It could. There-
Yeah, oh, that's where we got that. I'm just saying, that's where it
Yeah.
originated from.
As
I thought we
was
talked about
so
maintenance.
well illuminated in the beginning of this, our code has a lot of holes in it.
Granted, yes, it does. And so your question is still obviously valid.
Yeah.
but
Well, why
it-
wouldn't you be consistent?
Well, to me, it seems like 6 feet would be a good number. If somebody has
I think we
overriding
talked about
need to
6
be
feet.
bigger, come in and ask us
I-
to make it bigger. But otherwise,
Yeah,
you know, it can be approved.
I think you should be consistent.
I do too,
Yeah.
and that's a staff approval, so, you know, if you're up to 6 square feet, it can be a staff approval. If you have a reason you need more, then you gotta come to the commission.
Yeah,
It seems big to me.
6 feet?
yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah, it's actually seeming to me that we did have this discussion, we did agree to 6 feet, and maybe just.
We went over
missed
a
it.
lot of stuff.
Yeah, I know we did, yeah, so, and we
That
may not,
very
have
well
we may
could
not have
be.
actually decided, we may just have talked about it, not, yeah.
Yeah, I know we talked about the blade sign quite a bit. 'cause
Right.
We did.
'Cause that's new,
that
right,
could've been part
right.
of that conversation.
Okay, D2, order board sign. Under the first thing, it says it can be a staff approval, which I would disagree with, but then if you go further down, it says per CUP, which would be a conditional use permit. So I would suggest we just cut that off, and yes, a menu board sign would be a staff approval, but a order board sign would be a plan commission approval. And for those of you that haven't seen it before, this menu board sign is new too. We were asked to say something. If you look at it, it's the bottom one on the right, it's, so you got a restaurant or something, you know how you go down to Chicago, you can read the menu and things, and how convenient that is. We said, do we need something in our ordinance so you could put a menu board up? It seems like a reasonable thing.
And in a few communities, they've allowed those and not allowed sandwich board signs.
There you go.
You get something on the wall that people can't trip over in exchange for some way of notifying the daily specials.
I know Jake is planning on putting a menu board sign up in the new park for his concession stand. So, I mean.
It should be a great conversation at the council.
Right.
I don't like sitting through council meetings, but I might come just to watch that. On footnote 6, we allow religious institutions, schools to have monument signs within single-family and two-family zoning districts. I would like to see added to the end of that the lighting may be restricted on those, and we have done that in the past. Because our normal monument sign, if you go in there, we allow lighting and different types of lighting, but we have times for institutional in a single-family districts that, you know, this lighting's not gonna work. We gotta scale it way back, or we might say no lighting. There's reasons when you're in a single or two-family district, residential district, I think, to take a lot closer look at the lighting than you would in a commercial district. So I just feel for that footnote it'd be appropriate to mention that. Here's one, footnote 11. This is about our pylon signs. This goes back to this sheet that you made. Why do we say Royal Avenue is okay for a pylon sign? And the only thing I see is this, it's not Super America, it's Speedway. It looks like their lot's cut in half. The only lot I see on Royal that's not on Broad,
Walmart.
pardon?
Walmart.
No, that's,
Walmart?
no, Walmart, oh, Walmart's on
It's
Royal.
technically right away on Royal. So that was
I
the
thought that
one
was,
we had
is
to-
that Royal, or is that technically the frontage road?
It is Royal.
Okay, all right.
According to the.
Okay,
We had a discussion about
Yep.
Correct.
the
Yeah,
private
that was the
driveway,
one
because
exception
if
we
it
needed
goes
to.
back on this,
right.
once it goes back past, it enters into
Okay.
Walmart and goes past that
Okay.
driveway, that's,
I thought, you showed two lots here, and I thought that, and that's really all Speedway. Why do we have a line through there then?
It's two parcels that came across on the Dane County
Okay,
GIS
either
file.
that's wrong, or we made an error in allowing them building a building over a property line. So hopefully that's wrong, because there's a building goes right across that line.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, it would help then if you clean that up, and then we just mention that that's the Royal. Is that the only part of Royal that would have this ability then? Because where is it Royal and not Royal? Where does Royal stop? We gotta be really clear that we don't end up
Yeah,
with something else on Royal then.
Technically, I do not know where.
I think we gotta be clear
the
on that
name
before
stops.
we send this through.
It
And,
looks like Royal goes out and connects to West Broadway, and then as it goes around the front or back of Walmart, however you
Well,
consider it, it
well-
comes around that corner and that turns into Gishel.
well then,
Yeah.
I don't like calling it Royal, because that means then Goodwill could have a pylon sign. Because Goodwill then is on Royal. So we have to come up with a different way to define this, and a different way to allow that Walmart parcel to be able to do it,
So one way we could do it is with the map.
right?
And I guess technically that's then an overlay district. But if you're comfortable with the map, which is a lot more specific than the map you currently have, the map would be the best way to not rely on street
Well, you see where I'm going, we're
names.
gonna have these pylon signs creeping back. That's not our intent.
Well, I'm sorry, why are we wanting to allow this on Royal? Is it only because it has a frontage on the Beltline, and therefore we want streets that have Beltline frontage to be able
Yes.
to do this?
Absolutely. The whole key was always that it's only Beltline frontage that gets a pylon sign. In this one area, apparently there's a street between that property and the Beltline where it
Right.
isn't anywhere else.
So the
I-
issue is the Beltline frontage, right?
Correct.
We could define it as such.
Yeah,
Everything else is defined by right-of-way on Highway 12, technically. But yes, there is the Royal Avenue right-of-way in front of it, so we needed to make an exception for Walmart to keep their pylon signs compliant and allow them to have them in the future. I believe what Sierra was saying is where it goes around the corner, it does stop from being Royal Avenue and starts being a different street at the corner. I don't know exactly where it stops and starts.
I
but
thought you said where it hits Southtown, it's still Royal. We have to find that out.
Yeah, it's the Goodwill property. Like,
Yeah, the Goodwill property then would be eligible.
That's
Yeah,
eligible.
according to the map I'm looking at, it starts, Royal Avenue is labeled right in front of Goodwill, in
Okay.
between Speedway and
Goodwill and
Goodwill, and then
Speedway
it
have
curves to the
Royal
Beltline.
Okay.
Is the shading that we have on the map more accurately reflect what your preference is for
Yes.
pylon signs?
I would say absolutely. That's the way we've been doing it.
Well, if you forgive me, then I can't make good on my promise about eliminating the overlay district, but if the overlay district, as it's now drawn, reflects your policy preference, that's the way we should go.
Sounds like that's, yeah.
Yeah, we've gotten rid of the pylons. We used to have them all over the city. We've gotten rid of them everywhere except
It's-
for Broadway, and Broadway felt was
Yeah,
appropriate.
I'm a Madison native, I can remember back
Yeah.
that far, and it's remarkable, the change that's.
I wouldn't say every
Still got that.
one, don't we?
Ken's.
Ken's has one, Lacari, or whatever it's called now, the liquor store has one, but there's very few.
O'Connell's.
That one actually should have lost its grandfather status because it had a change of ownership. So, okay, move on. Item 13, we talk about where more than one building sign is allowed, and we say if it's more than one street. I think we should almost talk about more than one transportation corridor or something, because I'm thinking about the triangle, and I'm sure with all that boat traffic, we'd all say it's appropriate to have signage on the Ohio River. For the businesses, we worked really hard to try to get 26,000 square foot of commercial in that first building, and I think signage would be wholly appropriate on the Ohio River, for example. So it's more than just a street, that's another transportation corridor. And then that got me thinking, well, what if there's a really major bike path going through there? Would you not want to allow some signage? I think sometimes we're a little too stingy on signage. I don't want it to be garish, but sometimes the back of a building, if there's a lot of public traffic, whether it's a bike path, the river, whatever, it looks a lot better with a little bit of well-done signage than just blank.
Right.
Well, there's stuff on Broadway, there's stuff on Broadway that you can see from the Beltline.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's a street, but,
So-
Well, and.
or the
and
lake.
I guess that was my point too, when we were talking about the signs that stick out, what do you call it, that we were just talking about that were 12 square feet. That we were just talking about too, because I was thinking about Waypoint and I was thinking about the triangle and
Sure.
thinking about the fact that in terms of scale, those buildings are a lot bigger
Mhm.
than anything, than Cozy Home or anything we're gonna have on Monona Drive.
Sure.
And so a small circular sign with a, with a light is gonna look out of scale for those guys, and they're definitely gonna want to be on the larger side when it comes to signage.
Oh, I'm sure they'll want
Right.
additional signs there, and I think,
Right.
to me, I was thinking maybe a transportation corridor, but our expert will probably have a better way to word it anyway. But on the river, generally, I would think would warrant for a business another sign. They're going to want to advertise out towards that water, they're paying a premium to be on it. Bike path, I don't know.
Can you call it traffic corridors? There's
Transportation corridor.
So Lake Loop.
I think the best way to do it would be to put it on this map. would be to show those designated areas
Where
on
it's
this
okay.
map.
Right.
But the problem that comes up with that is that, of course, you can always amend it, but it's
Right.
like when we, the triangle, for example, if we'd have done this 2 years ago, we wouldn't have been thinking about the triangle because the triangle is a new development.
Right, if you have a map as a regulatory document, you have to make sure that it remains.
It has to be updated if
Yes.
circumstances change, and we're not very good about that.
So it might make more sense to, again, expect them to come to us for asking for an exception rather than trying to build it in.
Well, I think some of it we can build in.
Yeah.
I think we'd all agree the Yahara River. I mean, that's a no-brainer, and there's gonna be other things like that. And the cool thing is, they have time to chew on this now and come back with a solution. If we all agree that would be appropriate. I know we'll have that down on the triangle. Is there a better word? We have a place, is there a name we call that place? Has it been
Yahara
named yet?
Commons, you mean?
Yeah, the Yahara Commons is probably.
Yahara Commons? Well, that's just the
Yeah.
first building, though.
Right.
Not-
That's the
oh.
common.
No, the
No, it's the
current
whole-
is the first
Or
building.
the current.
The current, so what's Yahara Commons on? That's the area?
That's the
That's
whole
the
area
property.
supposedly, yeah.
Okay, good. So Yahara Commons for sure is going to want to try to sign
Well,
those
and I'm sure they're
businesses.
gonna want an exception. On the other hand, if I were the residents living on the other side
Right, that's what I was
Well,
thinking.
that'll.
of the
have-
river,
That'll have
right?
to do with.
Yeah,
the-
they have to be, yeah, then,
Then I wouldn't wanna be staring at a gargantuan sign or a lot. In fact, one of the things
The
we talked
sizing
about
would-
when we were
would-
designing the park was, because we talked about doing a beacon, remember
Did
that?
Chase have a sign?
The beginning to try to draw attention off of Broadway, and then we were like, no, we can't do some big flashing,
I don't
you
think
know,
Chase
lighthouse
will
kind of
traffic.
beacon.
Honeyswell.
Because it would be unfair to the residents in that area. So I think it's, again, it's that
Yeah.
Sure,
balance.
break-
But that would be, do we light it or not? I think we allowed, what's the old Bourbon Street called now?
breakwater.
Breakwater, I
Yeah.
think they have a sign on the river, don't they?
I was just wondering whether they
There are
do.
some
I would think they
signs,
would
some
want
need-
one.
some
Yeah.
signs that can
Do
be
they? I
very
think they do.
attractive and that don't, the problem is if they shed a lot of light
Right.
Right.
on the other properties.
Right.
Well, I'm gonna imagine that there's some typical light ordinances that we can build into this, which could apply to everything. I mean, I don't think we need to have a specific light
agree.
ordinance for every type of sign.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Can we move on?
Faces residents, I don't know.
I have nothing on the temporary business sign group. Go over to the permanent miscellaneous sign group. Can't believe that. I must have missed that page. If we start on, I'm not sure where this goes, but the on-site directional sign, it's confusing because it says city required sign category. We won't require it, but now I look at, for example, on-site directional sign, which is that fourth one down, that's something, is that, you intend that to be for private businesses too?
Yes, so
Okay,
what
so-
I'm talking about is, particularly if you have a drive-through, when it comes through your site planning
Right.
process, you're probably approving the location of those directional signs.
We are.
Mm-hmm.
But this says city staff approval, but it says city required sign, and it's not really a city required sign, it's an applicant requested sign.
City allowed?
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
the term here is city, well, it would be prudent, I think, to call it a city-required sign, that the applicant says, this is where I need directional signs, and you say, yes, that's where you should have them. I think that's a better place to be to avoid this spinning out of control. If we call it applicant requested, it sets a bad precedence, I think, and it really doesn't fit in that category then.
So that makes sense to me, but then don't we have to prescribe when they're required?
You
I mean,
could,
a required sign is only required if you've
Thank
said, here's when it's required.
We don't,
when you approve it on a site plan, we'll stand up for that. So we're making a content-based exception for category A and category B. we are regulating by content, and the reason we're regulating by content is in the Supreme Court decision, it said if a content-based regulation forwards public safety, then you can do it. And so that's how we're justifying having specific rules that allow these additional
So are these
signs.
public safety signs?
We could call them public safety signs as an alternative to city-required signs.
The idea is that any kind of directional signs is safety related because you want the traffic to go. You don't want, at McDonald's, you don't want the traffic to go in, going, exiting through the entry, right?
That's right,
Right.
and we, on the other hand,
Right.
we don't want proliferation of these signs where they're not needed. It's just the ability to get that logo on another sign. So I
Right.
believe through your site plan review process, and I believe you're already doing this now,
Right.
you're identifying the permitted location for those signs.
I mean, it does seem that city required is the best term, but I do think we have to define what we mean, which would be signs required for public safety or,
But do we require them? I mean, what happens
Well-
if we think you should put a sign up and they don't think they need it and they don't want to do it?
Well, I think that actually the gist is that we would want to require, if McDonald's, to use McDonald's as an example again, if McDonald's came up and they had, or it actually came up as it related to Remax, I believe, right? When we were discussing Remax, if they, but if McDonald's came up and they didn't request the signs to have an exit and an entrance, we certainly would, I think, would want to say, you're required to have, if you have 2 curb cuts and you're expecting the traffic flow this way, we expect you to put directional signs in. I would
And I'm
think we-
fine with that. I just
Yeah.
need, it's back to your, if we're going to say city required, then we need to make sure that we truly are going to require them.
So all of the signs in that left-hand most column on all 4 of the tables have a definition in the text, and the city required sign category is identified at the very top of page 6. I think that last clause, to provide information about required traffic flow where a safe path to a destination is not evident, is getting at what we have in mind for these.
that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Okay, then I have a question about them. We say 6-foot maximum mounted height. We don't allow that for directional signs that are on a post. I can understand if you have a sign on a building, but on a post, we don't let them go that high. So that's a problem, because down later, it says you can have them on a post. And so that would say somebody come in with a directional sign 6 feet in the air,
Yeah.
and we don't want that. Yes.
3 feet, 4 feet?
I think we're 4 feet. I think we're 4 feet to the top.
Okay.
So we'd have to distinguish between building mounting maximum height and post mounting maximum height.
We'll do that for this entire category.
Probably be best to do it that way. I anticipate most for this and perhaps on-site warning sign, whatever that might be. But if we just mention that you can be up to maximum 6 foot on a building or a fence and 4 foot on a post, that would get it down with the way we like to see them down. Because otherwise you're going to have 6-foot signs throughout the whole site. And people are going to come in and ask for these.
So I just want to ask the obvious question, because it seems like these are signs that are going to be right out on the edge of the street.
Right.
And I feel like we've already got a problem in Monona with these monument signs that are an obstruction to the sight line at an intersection.
Mhm.
I mean, there are all sorts of places all over this city where it would appear to me that no one regulated the placement of the sign because it is a safety hazard.
Do you have a sign in mind? 'Cause
I'm thinking about Winnequa, the north end of town.
the medicine
meets-
shop?
Yes.
Yeah, the problem with that one, and I agree, that one's bad. Our minimum is we have to be 15 feet from the curb and out of a vision triangle. And I would agree, I think the vision triangle got a little missed there. And what really hits it is the plantings on the end of it, where they've got those tall grasses. That's what really gets it, I think.
Right.
And it probably, I would guess when they looked at it, was right at the vision triangle, and then with those tall grasses, it obstructs it. I agree with that. And we do have that, and we have it in our ordinance, so we continue it, correct?
Yep. 15 feet.
But I would agree that one. The ones that got missed the most are all those stone signs we put in with our Monona Drive
Yeah,
rebuild.
yeah.
Those are tough, man.
Yeah.
Those are tough, and at that intersection too.
Yep.
You have to be able to pull into that bike lane
Yep.
and that turn lane to be able to see to the right.
Owen Road is terrible.
Yep, Owen Road is a bad one. There's a number of them that are bad.
I just want to make sure we're not piling on to that problem.
No, we look at it, we try to look at it all the time, and we have a lot of ordinance by the, we had one that got missed down there for Traceton. We actually made them move it because their approval did not allow it where they put it, and they put it there. It was an obstruction. And they went and they physically had to relocate the entire sign because it was not where it had been approved. But I would say Medicine Shop is right on the edge in the grasses, and we've talked about that before, I think with Sonia, about trying to get them to put a little different landscaping on the end of the sign. Because it's the grasses, I think, that really get it.
Right. Okay.
Agree, though. It's a good point.
Just to make sure we're on track, I'm hearing that on category A, we should impose that 15 feet and out of the right of way, or out of the vision triangle on those signs as well.
It should
Totally
definitely be out of the vision
different signs.
triangle.
Pardon?
It should definitely be out of the vision triangle.
But if you go 15
We
feet.
have the ability to grant variances to this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, then I think we should do it. Because this is, and this, remember, you, and maybe I might suggest that it's not a staff approval then on on-site directional signage, but right now it calls for staff approval on any of these. So if I'm Remax, I can go in and say, here, I want this sign, thank you. And it meets these requirements.
Should the on-site directional signs be per site plan approval?
CUP? Because everything commercial requires a CUP. I think they almost should, because that's the one where we'll get abused.
I think that makes more sense because I think there's going to be a lot of, 15 feet in some cases is going to make a lot of sense, but
Yes.
in other cases, it's going to be so far back that we're going to be messing with safety rather than adding to
Agreed.
safety. In another way, in a different way.
I agree.
That's
But I-
currently how it's handled.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and I've definitely seen McDonald's, for example, directional signs that are very close to the ground, but they are obviously giving you the information you need and they cause no sight obstruction.
Agreed.
It is possible to do that.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. B1, metal plaque sign. This is a new category again. Just a question, we never really talked about it. Up to 3 per historic building, property, or district. So you anticipate 3 plaques on a single building?
If it was a big one.
Okay.
Right.
We have no
I have no
historic-
sense for it.
So we used to be able, in the sign code, to have something called a historic plaque.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do that
Can't do
now,
that.
but we can restrict them to designated historic structures, sites, or buildings.
And then 2B2 is the institutional information sign, which we have approved, but it says city staff approval. That should still be a plan commission approval. I mean, that's a monument sign.
Yeah, it says 1 per lot with a CUP, the next.
Right, but then it says right next to it, city staff approval. That's contradictory.
Yes.
So we should take that down. I saw that. Footnote 10, that's the same item, but it says signs can be located attached to a wall, pole, or fence. I'd probably say a post more than a pole. A pole implies it's going to be really tall. And then that's where you can talk about maybe the maximum height for a post would be the 4 feet versus 6 foot on the
Yes.
wall or a fence. And then 11, sign can include either the name, logo, or symbol. I don't know what. I have a question on that. I don't even know what my question was. So basically, I guess they can have their logo if it's less than a square foot. We did
Yes.
talk about that.
So that comes into play on gas pumps. Timeless tellers,
Mhm.
propane cages, they all have like a sticker on them
Okay.
of one kind. We found the 1 square feet is a very commonly used kind of
That's
cutoff.
pretty close to what we've done, I believe. I know American Inn, we allowed that. There's a number of them we allowed that right around that square footage, and it's not garish.
Right.
Okay. And then on the last one. This is the yard sign, real estate sign, whatever kind of thing you want to talk about. I'm wondering why we allow 6 square feet of signage on the short one, and then we say the 10 square feet on the real estate sign, because I'm assuming we're still talking about just the signage area, we don't include the arm and post. Am I
That's correct.
So why are we allowing one more than the other?
Well, when we did the first one of these, and could no longer use those old categories, I went out and measured arm and post signs, and 10 square feet allows for the little open house thing up on the top. You see the little diagram that we have? So that's stuck on there, like on the
Oh, yeah,
weekends.
yeah. Right.
And then down below is
On
often the
contract.
realtor's name or
Right.
phone number.
Right.
So my question would be it be Armageddon, and if the other one was allowed up to 10 square feet? That would be
Yes.
Armageddon?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just had to ask.
Yes, so typically we see these other signs in 2 different sizes. One is barely bigger than a sheet of paper. It's about 1 square feet at the most. And the other is a total of about 4 square feet. So, we went and actually measured the most common kinds of signs. The ones that exceed 4 square feet all tend to be homemade rather than something you could buy at the hardware store or the big box
How
store.
big is your sign?
My yard sign?
No, when you're working on a home, it's a really
Yeah.
attractive sign. That's bigger than 4 square feet.
It is, yeah, it's,
6 square feet.
I think it's a little over 6 square feet.
Well, this allows up to 6 square feet, because that's the frame sign. That'd be the middle one, the frame sign. That would be the category for that. So.
Yep.
And I think it's attractive, and it's probably big enough.
Yeah.
So if that's 6 square feet, then, okay, I'm good.
No, it's 3 by 2,
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, all right, that's plenty big then. Most political signs are smaller than that. Most of them are
Much,
the
yeah.
4 square feet or less. Okay. Right. That's all I had tonight.
Kathy, do you have
I
anything?
have nothing to add.
Rob?
I'm good. For now.
I do know that.
You don't have anything? Brian?
I don't.
You don't? Susan?
It's covered.
Griff?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
Can I add, though, this is a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And I'm anxious to read it from start to finish, once it's finished, once you have the next draft. And there's just a ton of information in this. And we set the course for signage for a long time, so it's complicated. I think the first time you read it, it's got to be almost overwhelming. So I think it'll be good for the commission to see it again.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the subcommittee and for all your work. I know it, as I said earlier, it represents a big leap forward. And we're grateful.
And we want to look before we leave.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think we need to make a nice sign to celebrate this.
Maybe.
Great. The next item on the agenda, A2, is potential upcoming items, of which, Corey, do we have anything under that particular?
We know something's coming for the November 12th meeting.
Okay. Great, so we know something's coming, thank you, guys. We know something's coming for November 12th. That being the case, I'm going to move to number 3, where we're talking about upcoming meetings, and having talked to these guys, it appears as we stand right now that we don't have anything burning for October 22nd. So if it works for everybody,
That's good, I won't be here, so.
I'd like to suggest that we cancel that meeting and go for November 12th. Is that good for?
I will be
Sounds
gone
fine.
November 12th. so
Okay.
I could call in if that weren't required, but I just will not physically be in town. So.
Okay. We plan on canceling the 22nd, and we'll shoot for November 12th as the next meeting. Any plan commission requests for information? Yes.
Yeah, in light of the, what was it, that we're at, what's it called, just that little learning thing for Plan Commission?
Oh, the
Oh,
workshop.
Training.
yes.
Workshop, thank
Yes,
you.
the workshop, yeah.
I just want to make sure when we have future action items come, that we make sure we get all the information down there. It talks about, we're going to have a motion, it's always pre-written for us, but we're going to have the motion, it's going to be based on chapter this, of the zoning ordinance, chapter that. Make sure we're very thorough with that, because that's one thing I think they made a really big point about. You were there, Sierra, that you need to have that in record. And we have it, a lot of it in our staff reports. We got to make sure we get in our staff reports too, where we talk about, here's landscaping, here's the section of our zoning ordinance, and here's what we're looking at, and here's what we like or don't like about it. So that we start getting that in some, staff reports too. Both the staff report and then the final motion as written. If your recommendation is approval, then have a motion ready that says, based on this zoning ordinance in this section and the following findings of fact or protocol or whatever you find appropriate for that, we recommend approval with these following conditions. And then it's fairly easy at the meeting to just modify the conditions, add to them, to subtract them, or just the way it's written. It makes it, I think for us, for what I heard at that workshop, it'll hold up a lot better for whoever challenged.
Yes.
And it's better for the applicant.
Yes, so
Oh,
they can
sure.
go back and read it if they're confused.
Well, they get to see it before the meeting and they have things to respond to.
One of the other things that came up at the workshop, actually, Chris, that I wrote in my notes, which I have here, is that we needed to check to make sure that our application specifically says on the application that they have to show up, or if they don't show up, whether or not they can be denied, because that's been something that we know verbally, we've always passed on to people that they should be here, but we weren't sure if it wasn't on the application. We were going to check that. What does it say?
I think what we want to say is that we may deny it if they don't show up. Because
Right.
we have had times,
Right.
excuse me, where it's been like a
Right.
second hearing. It's really simple,
Exactly.
and I know they said, you
And
don't
they
even
come
have to show
from
up.
out of town.
Right.
Sometimes the people come from Milwaukee or
Right,
Appleton.
and we know that Sonia was at least passing that on in our
Yes.
cover letters, but we weren't sure if it was actually on the application. So
And if it's not, it should be on the
it should be-
application.
Yeah. it should
That they
be
need to
saying
appear in
that.
person.
It's like, and we do follow up with each applicant after the agenda gets posted to confirm that they are on the agenda and that a representative needs to be present at the meeting.
Is that in writing? Because that's what'll happen if it's ever challenged. So that's why having it on the
That's right.
application, the
Right.
recommendations, you put it on the application, it's in writing, the applicant's aware of it.
Yeah, so it's more of a courtesy when we call them
Absolutely.
to remind them.
And we
so
should do that,
They
and we
have to
should-
be-
we should
right,
extend
so
that
they have to be
courtesy, for
present,
sure.
And that we may deny their application, may deny their application
Yeah.
if they're not present.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right in the application. Anything else? Any other information requests? I do believe that takes us to adjournment. Or do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move adjournment. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.